That do it?
There we go. All right, so this is John Michael Dumais. I'm here with Marcus Stewart-Vernini, and Marcus has been involved, from early on in this pandemic and working to get groups going, action groups that were actually focused on observable, repeatable, kind of measurable outcomes, so we could actually get something done. So I thought I would invite Marcus over here today just to, have a little bit of discussion about how one might go about setting up a group for creating actually measurable outcomes. So how are you doing, Marcus?
Good, you?
Good. Thank you for being here. So, as if a group comes together for, food or prepping or, putting together directories of practitioners or trying to take care of water resources, or maybe it's just a kind of a freedom cell. They're like, that it's in a neighborhood or a town or a city, and they're seeing what's going on. How would you help them think about starting to work together so that they're not just talking, but actually getting something done from an early point?
I think, one of the better ways to get started would be to get people coalesced around specific subjects. So instead of, these groups where, to your point, try to focus in on, if you're interested in food security, law, you don't want to be blending those topics, right? Or starting a freedom cell. I mean, I guess freedom cell could touch in a number of areas, but
yeah, a freedom cell is a little bit, maybe it's not a good example because they're probably going to want to look at a variety of things, but let's just take food as an example. Say a group says, oh, what we want to talk about food security. How would you help them start to think about, in a fairly quick fashion, how to focus their efforts so they can actually get something done?
I would say, well, food security is very high level, right? So we need to get specific. And you would come together as a group, people who are interested in that high level of objective, and brainstorm ideas on the specifics of that, right? So actual root cellars, food in the winter, what if the grocery stores go down? Basically putting it all on the table, and like different people are going to have different ideas, right? So have an ideation session, and then you're going to want to have a session, and those could be free flowing, right? Really people bouncing off ideas off each other. And then you're going to want to probably have a separate session where people can go away, digest, they might come up with other things, but then prioritize. And really those are your objectives. And where action groups are different than operational organizations is you have a beginning and an end. An action group should evolve or get new objectives over time, and ideally measurable objectives. And it's not to say, again, that those don't evolve. Projects, action groups, I would say even the action group we did around food, that completely evolved from where we initially started. Another good example is the education one. And it's actually a beautiful example for it, because most of us, frankly, don't know what we're doing. But the most important thing is that we're taking steps. And we didn't want to send our children in to be muzzled or vaccinated, right? So we get like-minded people together and we started, and it did not start great initially, but we kept learning. And that's what's happening every single week, as we're evolving the process, coming up with new goals, adapting our goals. We have these curriculums coming at us and saying, well, we really don't want the kids to have that much screen time. So maybe we look at doing it this way, where we suck up the video time and translate to them. So, I mean, it's kind of, evolution and being open-minded, not getting too stuck on a mindset of, well, this is what we said here, right? Does that kind of help in sort of?
Sure. So yeah, let's recap then. So get a group of people together, do some brainstorming, and the important part of brainstorming from my point of view, and I think you said this, was kind of like, just let it be free flow, don't judge ideas initially. It's just kind of like all ideas are on the table, and you're really allowing people to really come from their biggest concerns, what they're seeing for themselves, maybe their neighborhoods, maybe their families, maybe their community. Then the second step would be perhaps a separate meeting after people have had a chance to look at that, and maybe update that, is to be able to prioritize, okay, so what's most important out of this group of things. So say that we wanted to be, let's go back to the food example, and we wanted to make sure we could, have 3 months of food. Say that was a goal, that we wanted to have 3 months of food available for everybody in the community, enough to weather a, shall we say, 3-month food shock. Now that's a goal. And how would you turn that, if that's a goal, how would you turn that into measurable action steps? Because you got to break that down. People need to, not everyone needs to run out and buy 3 months. How do you decide what to do, when, by when, kind of thing? So how would you help people think about getting to further clarity around steps to take?
Well, with that, you've got your end in mind, so you have to better define what the community is, right? Because 3 months of food to survive a food shock. So what's your community size? What is the average number of units per, right? So if that's 100 people, what does it really mean in terms
Exactly.
of survival?
So how many kids in the families, right? How many people are you actually talking? What is your caloric coverage for per family per week, or whatever the case may be? Something
So
like that,
gotta get specific to define that end goal,
right?
and then storage, communication, like things that you've worked on in terms of, what if everything does go down,
Yep,
right?
yep,
How and when do we communicate or have checkpoints or meet up? I mean, see, you got to start kind of working from that end goal in mind, but the 3 months of food, that's very specific. So it's really diving into the details of what that is.
yep. So
for
in this case,
everybody.
it's 3 months of food. So it'd be like, what kinds of food, how much food, by when are we going to have the
I
food?
win, exactly.
Where are we
Yeah.
going to store the food? And then if it comes time to the shock itself, and if that shock includes one of
But
the
you-
variables that you mentioned, perhaps a communication shutdown, that could include all communications, we don't know, right? So where
But
would
you
we,
also want to break it into milestones, right? Because 3 is your end goal.
yep,
So, I think people always like to feel progress, right? It's the old
Indeed.
check in the box.
yep,
So, there's a celebration at 1 month, 2 month, 3 months. And, I think it's breaking it into more discrete parts. So you also feel the progress and you can step back, celebrate and learn as well. Once again, it's not, let's just run all forward at this goal. Let's learn as we go forward and continue to do things better.
right. So it could be something like, given the breakdown of the community and maybe some of their dietary needs, which could be done in an early needs assessment, be like, what are the, 4 major or 3 major or X number of major groups of food that we're going to have. So dried rice, dried beans, what are we going to do about fuel if we're wanting to like heat up water, that kind of thing. And so, if people are gathering so much food, if everyone agrees to gather so much food by a certain point of time, say we wanted to have food security, let's say it's October 20th today, just as an example, say we wanted to have 3 months food security by January 1st. So that would be, say, about say 10 weeks-ish, maybe. Is that about right? So that would be maybe every 3 weeks or so. If we could, the goal would be to gather at least a month's worth of food. And then so you're saying that could be like a milestone. So by 3 weeks from today, let's see if we can gather a week's worth of food in these major areas. Then you could get together and see what are we still missing, and then continue to kind of clarify and qualify the plans going forward as you go, as you learn new things. Oh, I found a new source of this. Oh, we lost a source over there. Or I heard this particular company was having a sale and we can go out and get more of that. So it's constant. What I'm hearing is kind of constant communication and milestones and being able to celebrate when we get to interim milestones rather than think we having to get all the way to the end. And
Yeah, and
because that can,
have the basics along the way, the
Yeah.
basics. And big corporations are the same way, where a lot of times people forget the basics, but once you get past sort of the ideation and the free flowing, have agendas, capture actions, just those basic principles of organization.
Right.
Because if you don't do those, then you're just getting together and talking, and then people's lives go on and they forget, right? So it's
Yeah. So an agenda for a meeting, maybe the follow-up meeting would be, one, what's been accomplished since the last meeting, presuming the initial or earlier meeting would have had action steps. So what's been accomplished on action steps? Two, what do we still need to accomplish coming up? And then if we're breaking it down a little bit more by person, who's going to do what by what date, especially if we're trying to be accountable to each other. People need to be able to rely on others to accomplish things when they say they're going to. What else should we be paying attention to? Or what are some of the pitfalls that you see people falling into, and how maybe they can help themselves avoid them as best they can?
There's no shortage of pitfalls, for sure.
Indeed.
But that's why I think it's so important to stay specific to a subject, and again, agree to ground rules, right? I think we've seen this throughout this and another, but people tend to gravitate towards these other things that are happening versus the solution and what can be done. That's a tricky balance, right? But that's why staying focused on the objectives and trying to always bring people back to the objectives, and that we've agreed to these things, and that's why we're here. Is I think one of the ways to avoid many of the pitfalls, because objectives are positive, right? So that keeps us from going into fear or negative places. The milestones you talked about, having a plan, having a cadence of some sort. And that's where the cadence, you got to poll your audience or group, because, like 1 o'clock on Monday, every single week won't work for a lot of people, right? So it's got to figure out a schedule that can accommodate the most people possible. But those are some of the things that come to the top of my mind. I mean, you can, as I've mentioned in the past, project charter can be intimidating for a lot of people. That's why I think what we just discussed in terms of ideation, prioritization, and a simple plan and cadences, and just do the basics of having an agenda and accountability will get you the furthest.
Good. All right, so this is a beginning, and I think we're just probably going to leave it at that today, just to give people a sense of, you can do this. We can move forward. Organization is not, it's not too difficult if you stay focused on the task. I think it's also good to think about everybody in the group being leaders. Obviously, there may be some who step up to take a particular role, whether it's convening or taking notes or getting meeting minutes out to people, or whatever the case may be. But everybody in a group should really consider themselves a key player and not wait for other people to step up. If you see something that's needs to be done, or feel like there's something that's been missed, don't wait for permission, weeks later when the problem has arisen. If you see something, it's your responsibility as a member of the group to be proactive and bring that up to the group, and to the greatest degree possible. I know this is hard for some people, is to keep egos out of it, right?
Yeah, and to your, I think a point you made earlier, and even in the title, right? An action group, really in the simplest capacity, is to take some actions. I would say, even if it's not always the right action, that's the only way you can get new information.
Exactly.
Talking, theorizing might be fun. Where does it get you? Talk is cheap. Taking an action and learning something new, you can build upon that.
Yep.
So that's why I really just, it comes down to doing things like you've been in the community, right? It's like, until you talk to people, how do you know? You
Yeah,
just,
I mean, and some of the actions can be research actions, but then you take action on those actions. So like, well, what form of protein grain is, what form of grain has the best protein, and where can we get that? Well, so let's do a little research, and that research needs to be done, but then we make a decision based on that. Oh, it looks like, looks this or that grain looks like it's good. Can we get those? So it's one thing leads to another, and hopefully people don't get all bogged down. Now, in the case of Freedom Cells, that's different. We'll maybe have a conversation about how to approach that, but I would say it's probably similar in the sense of, if a group comes together and is looking at a whole wide range of things, you're still brainstorming and prioritizing, and you're, instead of just one thing, you might have 2 or 3 things that you're working on kind of simultaneously. Hopefully whatever group that you're working with is big enough that maybe you can have subcommittees to do that and come back and report for each meeting. Say there's energy and food and healthcare, some of the real basics that I think people are looking at right now. So I'm sure we'll have further conversations as we go, and please feel free to call on me to if you need help. Marcus, I don't know if you're too busy at this point. I know you've been a point source, a resource for people in the past as well. If you want a little bit of kibitzing in your group or with your group about how to move forward, but we'll try to get more stuff up on the site about just getting stuff going. We'll have a little bit of a training on the project management module on the VCAL site. If people want to use that, it's not necessary to use, but it's there if you want some further tools and accountability. So I guess that's it today.
Always happy to help, like you. So appreciate it.
All right. Keep doing what
And
you do,
one
Marcus.
of the pitfalls we didn't mention is obviously, like me, don't spread yourself too thin.
Yes.
Bite off what you can chew.
Yes. Well, I guess that comes down to what you were saying about cadence, maybe cadence having to do with, what's a good rhythm for you. You have to, everyone has to decide, and, everyone, this is a time where people do need to step up and maybe leave their comfort zones a little bit, but don't leave them so far as to leave yourself exposed energetically and then having a weakened immune system, because we all know there's a downside to that. But I think what we can do is know that we have a building community, a growing community, and we can really start to work with each other and rely on each other. And I'm hoping that we can see some really excellent results in the next period of time. So thanks again for your help today.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk soon.
We'll do this again.
All right. Take care.
You
Thanks,
too.
John Michael.
You too.
Bye.